Every life has a story, and every story is worth sharing. Your story, my story, and our story speak of victory and defeat, joy and sorrow, resilience and vulnerability. They are not just our story, they are Christ's story in us. They are Kingdom Stories from Down Under.
Among the many people we interview at Kingdom Stories from Down Under, we've never had the opportunity to interview a politician. But tonight, we have someone, I wouldn't say she's a politician, I would say she's an advocate, which is far greater than a politician, because this life of being out there in the community and voicing for the community has started long before politics, and I'm sure it will continue long after politics. Tonight, I have the privilege to have a Kingdom Stories from Down Under, Maryka Groenewald from Australian Christians.
Yes. Well done on the surname.
That's great. I identified you with Australian Christians because that's a political party.
Of course.
But I'm sure there's a lot more to you than just a political face.
I would hope so, yes.
Is it okay when I say that you're more of an advocate than a politician?
Absolutely. And I say that often to people, please don't insult me and call me a politician.
Oh, then I got this right. Because I haven't gauged this, you know.
Exactly.
I took a risk here.
Oh, so
could have been the other way.
But you're spot on. You're
Okay.
spot on. But no, definitely I do consider myself probably more an advocate than anything else. And probably the anomaly in that sense, because I find these days politicians don't really have a good rep with the community at large, unfortunately. And so that authenticity to me is what makes you a good advocate, is that authenticity. Yeah.
And I think as an advocate, as I said, it doesn't just stop in that political life.
No.
With politics, you're a politician for a while.
Yes.
And then after that, you do something else.
That's right.
Whereas
That's
now,
right.
as an advocate,
Yeah.
you have been doing that in various leadership roles that you've held.
Absolutely.
And you will continue that after politics, if there is after politics or whatever you want to do in the future.
So, yeah. And it's interesting because I've always had, since I was little, I've always had this sense of, the community, and growing up in South Africa too, the need is much more in your face as it would be in a country like Australia.
Yeah.
So I've always grown up with, I'm very blessed to have grown up with a family that has always been very generous and very mindful of the plight of others around them. We were never the sort of people to go out of sight, out of mind. My grandparents, my parents, incredibly involved in all things community, very generous.
Yeah.
And I mean, that stuff really rubs off on us as kids, which is such a blessing.
And this is not in your genetics. This happens because of the values that were passed on as legacy to you.
Absolutely. And that's why I say to people, it is so important, when you are modelling Christ to your kids, do that in word and deed as well. It's great to be able to, as they did, teach the Bible. But my parents, my grandparents, they were out there. They were physically being those vehicles and that extension of Christ in the community. And that's the kind of stuff that sticks, because you see how it changes people.
Yeah.
You actually see how that
Firsthand,
outworking of the Holy
in the
Spirit.
trenches.
Absolutely, how it changes people. And people are so open then to actually go, but what motivates you to be here with us? Amazing opportunity to share the gospel.
So you grew up in South Africa, born in South Africa?
Born in South Africa, yes.
Your parents, when did they migrate, or grandparents?
Yeah, so my grandparents, or it was just my immediate family that immigrated about 20 odd years ago. So I'm more Aussie from South Africa.
Okay.
So I'm probably more Aussie now.
And to South Africa from Germany?
No, so my grandparents on my mother's side were of Dutch heritage.
Okay.
And on my dad's side, I think there's a bit of Scottish and English in there.
Okay.
But several generations South Africans. So they were there for a long time before they,
Where were you born? Which
Johannesburg.
Okay.
Yeah, so not as lovely as Cape Town or any of those beautiful places. And Johannesburg's interesting because, again, the social, the political aspects of Johannesburg, and obviously you've got Soweto, which is close to Johannesburg as well. And I remember as in primary school, we used to have sporting events there.
Yeah.
And, driving through the townships and being very confronted with what was around you at the time. And, you just took these things for granted.
This is in the early 90s?
Early 90s, 2000s. So 2001 is when we immigrated and came over to Australia.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So What's the first memory of childhood that you have?
Gosh, first memory of childhood. Probably playing in the backyard with my grandparents. So it was at a time where both parents had to work. So, mum and dad worked.
What were they doing?
Dad was in sales, mum was in sales as well, but dad did FIFO back then even.
Oh.
So, FIFO was kind of part of my life since I was a baby, really.
Wow.
Dad worked away, worked with a mining company, and also worked through Africa extensively.
Yeah.
And I think growing up too, Dad seeing what not-for-profits were doing in some of these Northern African countries. So a lot of that stuff, he always used to share in the stories of things he would see. Yeah. So again, the social aspect was very much entrenched growing up. But Dad did sales, Mum did sales. They went to work soon after I was born because, you couldn't really afford to not work.
Yeah.
And so my grandparents looked after me. Well, my grandma was the primary caregiver because at that time Granddad worked too. And I just remember, my grandma was this incredible person. Loved God, used to write the most incredible poetry.
Wow.
Just
in English or in South Africa?
Both.
In Africa.
Both. She just had this way
There's
with
no South
words.
African.
Yeah. In South African,
Yeah.
which is so many different languages in itself.
Sure.
But she used to write this beautiful poetry, and I had such a rich childhood, and the earliest memories are actually of me spending that time with her and just how she raised me. It was just
Beautiful.
Such a blessing.
No other siblings?
I have a younger sister,
Okay.
Kizan. So she's the baby of the family. She's 21, and she's in the army. So,
Wow, Australian Army now.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. So she is an incredible sports person, played state soccer.
Whoa.
Love her to bits. She'll always be the baby of the family, even though she's pretty much an adult.
Any sports that you...
Yeah, I did. I did state athletics and netball. So...
Because if she's good at sports, somehow it runs in the family, doesn't it?
It does, yes. My mum was incredibly talented. She was an incredible sprinter and athlete.
Okay.
And so, just fostered that in us as kids. I loved athletics and netball. Did that fairly well when I was younger. I don't know what happened in high school. I think I just got lazy or something and stopped doing.
Cool,
yeah, and I just thought, I don't want to do athletics anymore. And so I kept with netball, which I really enjoyed, and still to this day I love it. Very rich childhood, opportunity and encouragement to do whatever, but do it well.
So how old were you when you migrated to Australia?
I was 13. I was 13 and my sister was just a baby. So
pivotal age.
Very much so.
You had friends, obviously. You were building up. Just finished primary school, going into high school there.
Yes.
Is it a middle school there, or how does it work in South Africa?
Yeah, so in South Africa you had your primary and then you go straight into high. So year 7 was the end of primary school over there.
Okay, so year 8 was...
year 8 was the start of high school, yeah.
So you finished primary school or just 1 year short?
Yeah, finished primary school. My parents wanted to have me have finished primary school first, which was great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so, I started high school here, and it was a huge change because I skipped year 8 when we immigrated.
Oh.
And went straight into year 9. So it was a culture shock, a learning shock, but God was so faithful. Really carried and gave me the grace. And
were you quite independent in your learning, or you needed a lot of support?
I was quite independent, but the thing is, you went from doing school, and I was very blessed because I grew up bilingual. So English was always part of my growing up. I went to an English kindergarten.
So English was your first language, or Afrikaans?
Afrikaans was.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think my parents recognised fairly early on that, it'd be good to be able to raise me with both. So went to an English kindy. But of course, starting high school and doing maths and science and everything in English.
Oh, so you were doing the
school in Afrikaans,
and English was just a subject.
English was just a subject.
And now everything was English and no Afrikaans.
No Afrikaans. So everything now, concepts, foundations, and of course
only maths was the same.
Yeah, pretty much.
Music.
But I still go, even how people explained maths in English, I went, oh my goodness, this is so complicated. Yeah. So that was a big learning curve, and just really relying on God, because wow, it was, you're trying to adapt, you're trying to make friends, you're trying to work out what this environment of school is going to look like, where you fit into it.
It could have broken you.
It could have, really, and when I look back on it, and again, so amazing. We had a school chaplain at my high school. Public school, I didn't go to private school. My parents didn't have the money for it. But we had a school chaplain, and he just every now and then would check in and go, hey, how you going? And of course, me knowing God and loving God and going, hey, there's a chaplain here, how fantastic. I really found that so helpful.
So you knew what a chaplain's role was?
Yeah. Well,
because a lot of students would never know what a chaplain does.
I just thought he was a pastor. And then, of course, the concept of chaplaincy, then I thought, wow, this is a great thing to have. Because in South Africa, it's very different. Schools, assemblies, God is part of
everything.
Everything.
Public schools, no problem.
Exactly. So for me, it was just the assumption you pray. I mean, we had assemblies every day. Start with prayer, praise and worship. It's just part of your schooling.
Yeah.
So when I came to Australia, I mean, it was great to have this chaplain, but not a lot of people talked about God.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really great having Marcus, because, being a school chaplain, I had that still a bit of support and connection there. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So why did your parents migrate to Australia? Do you know?
I do. Look, I think it's a combination of factors, and I know it's something my parents prayed about and thought about long and hard before they moved. But as amazing and beautiful as South Africa is, I think my parents recognised that there wasn't a future for me or my sister.
Yeah.
And it was sad because, you could be a really bright kid, but you won't be able to find a job. And of course, the crime aspect was very, very, very bad. And my dad actually, just before we immigrated, he got hijacked and shot.
Oh.
So it was the year before we were meant to move over. And as horrible as it was, I think it just solidified in them that, you know what, we're making the right decision.
Yeah. How did that happen? Was he driving from
so Dad was driving, pulled over to write something down. And how is this, right? God's hand over all of it. But Dad pulled over, and it was a road that sort of ran along this huge ditch.
Yeah.
And Dad pulled over, and he saw this car pulling up behind him, and he thought, oh, this looks dodgy. Anyway, he thought he'll give him a benefit of the doubt. This guy comes to his window, taps on the window, and just as my dad wanted to pull away, he saw this guy pulling out a gun. So the first shot went through my dad's arm.
Oh, he shot? He didn't even just...
No. The first shot went through dad's arm. And so the car veered sort of halfway into the ditch, and Dad kind of said, look, do whatever, please, just do what you need to do. Climbed out the other side of the ute, and then this other guy walks up to him, looks him in the eye and says, sorry, and shoots my dad again in the stomach.
Oh.
So Dad's going, I mean, still to this day, I don't know what went through Dad's head, right? But he just so happened to be in a position where if he was just 30 centimetres lower into that ditch, no car passing past would have seen him, because they jumped in the ute and sped off.
Yeah.
But a kid from school saw my dad, just as they happened to, in those 10 seconds driving past, saw my dad lying there, recognised him, and they stopped and picked him up and took him to the hospital. So it all happened.
So they stole the ute and left your dad to die on the side of the road.
Yeah.
So the hijack, was it just for the ute, or hoping that there's more in the car?
Sometimes they do. But look, the sad thing with South Africa is it's the brutality, it's just killing for the sake of killing, I mean, my dad freely relinquished his car, he said the briefcase, money, wallet, but it's almost like it wasn't at that time, it started being way more brutal than for the need of a good. it was just for the sake of...
So they took him to hospital and he survived?
Yeah, Dad
Wow.
survived. Yeah, till to this day. And he won't mind me saying this, but, you know, we always joked because my dad's he's a well-built man. And the doctor said, you know, if my dad didn't carry an extra bit of weight, you
He
know,
wouldn't have made it.
That's right. So he still uses it till this day to go, see,
Yeah.
if it's good that I'm a bit more
Imagine
solid.
if you had been there, you know, you wouldn't have survived.
That's right. That's right. So we often, you know, reflect on that story, and, you know, in a sense, that was the final deciding factor for my dad, because he said, how would he have coped if something like that happened to my mum or my sister or myself?
Must have been a big shock for the whole family, though.
It was, yeah.
Just the fact that he survived. What a relief.
That's right. And, but, you know, people in South Africa, you know, you learn to live with it every day. You know, it was only when we moved to Australia that I realised, wow, you know, barbed wire fencing around a house, probably it's not a normal thing. Or, you know, we used to have these security doors before you go into
screens.
bedrooms. You know, we paid subscriptions to have security companies, you know.
Monitoring.
Absolutely, because you had to.
Yeah.
So on one hand, it's so sad because South Africa is such an incredible country with culture and so much that makes it such an awesome place. But yeah, there's a lot of healing that needs to take place, a lot of repentance too. Yeah. So yeah, lucky
so you're back
to
in
have
Australia, going to high school. What high school did you go to?
Kareem Senior High School.
Great school, yeah.
Yeah, it was a really, really great school. I loved it. And interestingly, that year when we immigrated was the year that Australia granted a lot of visas for South Africans for mining companies. You know, FIFO was kicking off. So there was probably about, you know, 20 odd South Africans that started at the same time at Kareem.
Oh, beautiful.
So
you made some friends easily.
You know, it's weird. I think people were just, as a young person, you probably were really mindful that you didn't want to kind of, you know, cluster in your little groups. So even though we all had this common understanding and we were from this common place, none of us were friends.
Oh.
We all had like our little groups, but I think we were all just very mindful that, hey, we had to adapt and we couldn't stay in our little South African bubble. And my parents encouraged that too, you know, like try and make friends and think outside the box. And so that's
and church-wise?
Yeah, church-wise. We were connected with the church, you know, when we came to Australia, several churches. We actually started out at a South African church as well.
As you do.
As you do. Good community of people. And then, you know,
eventually you end up there afterwards.
Yes. And we always thought, you know, you move, to the other side of the world to join a South African church, you know, the irony of it. But it was a good community. And like I said at the time, a lot of South Africans coming in. That 2000 to 2001, a lot of South Africans immigrated. Yeah. So we were very blessed, you know, because had a good network of people and made friends. And then, of course, you know, the rest is history in a sense. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, really good.
And Christian life, in a sense, family, very strong in their faith, your parents?
Yeah,
both
they
mum
are.
And dad?
Now, and look, life happens as it does, unfortunately. So my parents, we immigrated and we were here for about 10 years and my parents got divorced, unfortunately. But that's also a story of God's redemption now, looking back on it as to how they are now. But that was a bit of a, you know, a sort of spanner in the works.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people perhaps don't realise. Yes, we loved God and we cling to God and it was awesome. But, you know, there's a lot of emotional things that take place when you immigrate. You know, you leave family behind. You leave friends behind. Yeah. And FIFO life, you know, it takes its toll. You know, Dad till this day, you know, will always encourage people when he meets them and goes, you know, please think twice before you do FIFO. Or if you do, put a time limit on it and stick to it. Yeah. So, you know, all that wisdom in hindsight's been great. But, you know, they're still great friends. My dad remarried and, you know, that's been a blessing too. So it's, you know, even though it hasn't turned out how perhaps in their heads they thought it would, God is still across it all. Yeah. Yeah.
When did you give your life to the Lord?
I was 10 years old.
Oh, in South Africa.
Yes. And I, they often say, oh, you can pinpoint a moment or you can pick a moment. And I remember at the time our church building wasn't available. So we had it in my primary school.
Yeah.
And I just remember, really simply the pastor at the time going, if you want to give your heart to God. And I remember looking up at my mum and, mum was standing there and I felt this warmth and this joy. And I thought, I know what this means. I know what it means to do this. Yeah. And so, I was 10 years old in my primary school building. And of course, I remember that so vividly because I just remember the warmth and, of course, like I said to you, just at the time, being very involved with outreaches and things and just knew God was so, so real.
So when did you actually get baptized?
When I was 18.
In Australia?
In Australia.
What church?
C3 Joondalup.
Okay.
Yeah, we're a small group of people back then. But yeah,
so
I was 18
you started
years old.
at Heaven Heights and then you went to Joondalup, or
we were always at Joondalup
at the small campus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then did youth there. Was very much involved with youth there and got baptized there.
We had John Finkelly here.
Yeah, I saw one of the episodes. I mean, John Finkeldy has been part of the See-Through, Hepburn Heights since forever, since I can remember.
Yeah, and Shiloh before that.
Yeah, and Seth, I remember Seth at this stage, he was a youth pastor at C3 Hepburn, and he's now running a church in, I think, San Diego.
Small world.
It's just amazing. So very, very blessed to have had that. And of course, being baptized again brought a whole different level of growth and dimension to my faith. Yeah, definitely.
Did you experience a Holy Spirit renewal as well? You went into that world, or?
Do you know I did? But I think when you're 18, I knew what I was doing. I understood and I was ready for it. It took me a couple of years, though, to really reconcile and work out what the Holy Spirit wanted me to do and what I needed to do. And so I went through uni. That was the time my parents got divorced. So there was so much happening for me.
Another curveball.
Yeah. But, I always knew at the back of my head that, God was going to call me back and there would be this moment where I know that, okay, I can't run any longer. I can't ignore it any longer.
Yeah.
Sort of going through uni, finishing uni, I just had this...
What did you study?
I did community development and politics.
There you go.
Yeah, so very, very fortuitous at the time because I didn't think this is where I would end up. But loved it. I wanted to be a pilot originally.
Oh, and you probably would have made it.
Yeah, I really loved it. And my dad was so supportive. I did work experience up at Jandakot. I used to love driving to Jandakot.
Actually, I know a flight instructor. He comes here. He's South African.
Is he?
And
there you
he
go.
comes here on Friday mornings at prayer at 6 a.m. We have a men's prayer at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday mornings.
Gosh. Need to get a few tips again.
And he lives here in Madley.
Okay.
And he's an instructor.
Wow.
Great guy, South African.
So one day, if I want to pick it back up, he's the guy.
He's the guy.
He's the guy.
So you did fly. You went for a work experience.
Yes, and I loved it. Got my student pilot's license.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and so
you did a few hours.
Yeah. So the next step was the private license.
Yeah.
And I just realised one day, Dad said to me, "Can you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life?" And I kind of had this epiphany and went, oh, flip, like indefinitely sitting in a cockpit with one other person. Heck no. I cannot do this for the rest of my life.
I have to move.
So literally, I remember it was a couple of weeks and I changed pretty much the whole course of what I was doing. And that was the point where I said, Lord, you show me what you need me to do.
Okay.
You open the doors, you guide me. And of course, community development and politics was the avenue. Yeah, and praise God.
So what was your first job out of uni?
First job out of uni was working with a advocacy organisation called Migrate, and they actually advocated for kids in care. So that was a huge eye-opener for me.
Yeah.
Because when I was younger, we actually adopted a little girl as well. And so that awareness was always there.
In South Africa or here?
In South Africa,
Okay.
yeah. And South Africa had orphanages.
Did you bring her here as well?
No.
Oh.
So luckily it worked out that her dad was able to
Look after her.
look after them again,
beautiful.
which was amazing because they were reunited.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
beautiful. But the irony then, of course, finishing uni and then ended up working for this organisation that advocated for kids in care was a huge eye-opener. Huge.
Another world
Definitely.
that most people are not familiar with.
And I wasn't aware of it. You know, I often thought that, you know, I mean, my family was by no means perfect.
Sure.
But when you're really sitting down with young people who have probably lived in 20-odd houses by the time they're 18, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So I really loved that job. And again, an eye-opener for me, the difference between bureaucracy and policy and actually what happens at a community level.
Yeah.
And I just thought, why is this so hard? Why is change, to affect change and make life easy for people, why does it have to be so cumbersome? And why does it have to be so covered in red tape? And I actually heard last week that they're now changing some of the legislation so that kids, after they turn 18, that they still have some support from the government, which is so crucial. So I'm really grateful for that.
So you shifted something.
Well, gosh, team effort. That's what I often say. You know,
It's so hard to do, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, and it's
Because,
long-term stuff. Absolutely.
It's not what you do, it's what you shift.
Yes, very true.
Yeah.
Very true. And, you know, you don't realise it at the time. You sort of go, Lord, this seems...
It's good that you don't.
Yeah.
Because pride would kick in.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
And overachievement, and you become content and you think, oh, I've done this. I think God keeps us humble in that way, and also makes us, it provides a platform for the next.
Yes.
You know, so otherwise you think I've achieved too much already, you know.
I'm done.
Yeah, I've done my part.
Great, well done, me.
Come on, guys, you know, for the next 20, 30 years, the kids in this country will benefit from this. You know, I can, you know.
That's right. Pat on the back. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, hope never get like that. And you're right. I mean, that is one of the things that, you always pray, Lord, you know, just keep us humble and keep us in the right area. So that was my first job. Worked with a lot of youth, a lot of young people. And yeah, like I said, it was an eye opener. Yeah.
Boys, alcohol, gambling,
do you know,
drugs.
Yeah, you know, a lot of sexuality stuff. Like even then, I mean, a lot of the young people were struggling with their gender ideologies. They were struggling to find their place in the world. Relationships. There were a lot of younger girls who were pregnant.
Did it shock you?
It did a little bit.
Because, I mean, you were sheltered, obviously.
I was sheltered, but I think to me, it was the first time I was confronted with the fact that, you know, before I would think, oh, how can people get themselves in these situations? And how is it that young people can be so unwise and so this and so that? And so I realised, this, you know, gosh, this is how, you know, we're a product of our social environment. So for these kids, the fact that they were going through this stuff, it was just a product of their social environment.
Yeah.
So, you know, especially the younger girls who all they wanted to do, they just wanted identity and to feel secure. So, you know, some of the girls were 18 and getting married.
Yeah.
Falling pregnant. And then, of course, you know, not dealing with a lot of the emotional stuff. There would then be things that, you know, you'd have to deal with a lot of the young people when they are going through pregnancies.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge learning curve for me, but also a huge wake-up call.
You were also young.
That's right.
It could have been you.
That's right.
I mean, you were managing them, but it was almost peer-to-peer.
Yes, I mean, I was 20, you know, 3 or whatever it was.
Some of them were older than you.
Some of them were. And it was just incredible at the time because I remember thinking, you know, these young people are so resilient.
Yeah.
And a lot of them truly, they really wanted to have a different life for their kids. And so that was a driver for a lot of these young people. They were so desperate to have their own kids in a sense because they wanted it to be different. And I remember one of the other things that was really an eye-opener too, which they've now changed, is young people, when they were leaving care at the age of 18, you were no longer, under the care of the state. So they just gave them a black rubbish bag to put all their stuff in, and then off you go.
Yeah.
And we could not believe that this is how the government actually treated young people. I mean, what does that say to a young person?
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. And at the time, my manager was very instrumental in changing the legislation so that every young person had a bag. They had their own bag, their own suitcase, just giving them dignity and a sense of worth.
An identity.
Yeah, an identity,
and
exactly.
Saying you can do this. It's a graduation into something beautiful. It's the beginning of your adult life.
Exactly. And for a lot of them, what we perhaps receive from our mum or our dad, encouragement and direction, a lot of these kids didn't have that.
Did you have a crisis period when you were a teenager?
Not when I was a teenager.
Early 20s?
Yeah, probably early 20s, going through uni.
With the divorce?
Yeah, I think so. But not in the sense of, questioning God or rebelling. I just went through this stubborn phase where I thought, Lord, what the heck?
Yeah. Are you real or are you for real?
I remember never doubting it, but I always used to think, oh gosh, I used to ask questions,
Good.
I really used to go, God, why? And I remember with my sister at the time, Dad was out of the picture for a little bit. So, Mum and I were sort of, caregivers for my sister, and I would do uni, work 3 jobs. My mum worked 3 jobs. So,
Life's expensive in Australia. You thought South Africa was expensive.
Yeah, it was a hectic time,
So what jobs were you doing? A restaurant?
I was working as a barista. I did sales during the day. I worked at a Chinese restaurant on the weekends, $5 an hour. Looking back on it now.
You'd do it all over again. You would.
Yes,
you would.
probably.
I would too. I've done it all.
I just worked everything that was available or where I could find a job. And, I was so lucky, praise God, because everything I applied for at the time, luckily I was able to have a job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a hard time. Mum was working day shifts, night shifts. I think she ran on a couple of hours of sleep for years. I don't know how she did it. But, I got Kizan through school. And then slowly, the restoration started and, started talking to Dad again, and, Mum and Dad started sort of mending that relationship again. And, that took a while, and I think as a young person, so much of my life was wrapped up in that, like you said, that comfort and, we're
security.
A godly family. We were raised, we love Jesus. How does this happen to us? This can't happen to us. No. And it did.
Yeah.
So... it was,
and there's also stigma attached to it, especially in the Christian circles.
Absolutely.
With the traditional view, also culturally, because the people knew you, South Africans knew you, and they knew the situation.
And at the time,
it's a small community.
It's a small community.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And now we're a bit wiser. But I remember at the time. It's great to be able to have a community of church people praying for you and partnering with you and caring for you. But I remember at the time thinking, they need tools. People need tools.
Sure.
They need counselling, or they need something to help them. And so I think that's something the church has really grown into and doing a bit better now. And, instead of sort of going, they're going through a marriage issue, or, oh gosh, this is too tricky for the church to handle.
Yeah.
We're actually a bit more aware of that sort of stuff now and more able to speak to families who are perhaps going through a situation.
What's interesting? If you go in a court or into a mediation meeting with a judge, what I notice, what they do is they ask you questions to make you feel guilty. And they do the same to the other person. So even though you may seem like you're a victim in the whole thing, they will let you, they'll drill you down until you realize that you're also guilty and the other person also guilty. So they don't give. So then you begin to see yourself guilty and you repent and you make it up. So a lot of the times, that's why mediation happens in front of a judge, when they have hearings, because the judges know how to help you see yourself as you are.
Gosh, I wish we
messed
had
up.
them. Yeah.
And, he's not there to boost your ego at all. He's actually there to kill your ego.
Yeah.
To such an extent
True.
that you realize, hang on, I'm that bad.
Really look at
and then,
yourself.
then he'll talk to him as well, and he gets that, and then he'll go back to her, and he'll say, you know, at the end of this, you will lose it all, both of you.
Yeah.
You will lose your assets, you will lose your family, you will lose everything you worked for. Now you think about it.
Is it worth it?
Do you want to go to court? Do you want to split us up? And it's so confronting. And
Yes.
a lot of the times they say, no, we'll fight this on. And then he says, well, there's something else here that is much greater than the problem.
Yeah.
There's problems behind the problems that you haven't sorted out.
Yes.
And I think that's why a lot of the issues are out there.
And I mean, the family courts, how they're geared up anyway, it is a bit of a mess. And
it's a business. It's almost, they promote this.
Yeah.
We live in a very, very painful society.
And, you know, the litigation side of it too.
Oh.
You know, family law makes a killing. And I remember at the time...
Well, lawyers do. And everybody else except them too.
Yes, but that's the thing, you know, the people that are the worst off, unfortunately, are the parents and the kids.
The kids are even worse.
Yeah, and it does, you know, at the time perhaps, you know, parents, they can't see, they're just caught up in the hurt of it and the emotion of it. You know, you're not thinking rationally or clearly or anything like that. I think even mediation services have come a long way to actually try and remedy a lot of that before it gets to a court phase. But unfortunately, you know, in my parents' case, you know, it had to go through the courts, which was unfortunate. Yeah. Hindsight's a lovely thing, you know. But yeah, one thing I think here too is the family law courts need a massive reform, massive reform, especially around the area of mediation and how quickly governments issue or how quickly the courts issue restraining orders and things like that. Because alienation is a big thing in Australia too, parental alienation, you know.
I think we are the most fatherless nation in the world.
Yeah.
We've killed the dads in this process, so it's quite painful.
Yeah.
When did you get married?
When? Gosh, 6 years ago.
Okay.
So 2014, I think it was.
Great.
Yeah.
How did you meet your husband?
Yeah, so Rian and I met through church. Okay. My mum was actually going to this church at the time. Mm-hmm. And so Rian's was always part of the church. And so it was in that process of me, you know, coming back to church, and Mum was like, hey, you know, come with me and see what it's like. And so, started going back to church and just wanted to, you know, find God for me again, you know, instead of sort of being caught up in all these other things. And you always think that, right?
Sure.
And then in the midst of all of this, you know, you meet your husband. Oh. So it worked out well. So Rian and I, dated, got married in Bali, which was awesome. Lucky that we could do that. And we had all our close family and friends just on this week of sort of wedding, you know, with us.
How did he propose to you?
So Rian took me to a V8 track. I love fast cars.
You love fast cars. What do you drive?
I drove a Ferrari. He had a Lambo, I had a Ferrari, and I was doing like my laps. And then he had a different placard for every lap that we did. And I just remembered going, oh man, like I really want to finish this lap. And this guy's like, oh, there's a sign. You know, they had to actually point me to the fact that here's this poor guy standing on the side of this track going, hello, did you see my signs? We did the racing track and just had a day of just spending time together, and it was really, really good.
You said yes?
Yes, I did.
He knew exactly.
In the midst of all of that, yeah. So
did he buy you a fast car after that?
Oh, no, I got jibbed.
It will come.
That's right. And it was so funny because at the time he gave me like this really, like this little made up like ring, temporary ring. And I remember going, oh, great. Like, how do you propose to someone and you don't even have their real ring there? But it was just part of Rian just, like knowing what I'm like and just, kind of going, ha, sucker, as part of the engagement day. And then obviously hadn't got the ring later. But yeah, it was a good day. Really, really good day.
Wonderful. Why Bali?
We just loved it. We loved the idea of actually going somewhere and having family and friends just in a relaxed environment too.
No other agenda? Just you had to be there, basically, in a resort.
And well, we just loved it. We loved Bali.
Which resort was it?
It was the Royal Pina Maha in Ubud.
Okay.
So it was a beautiful venue next to the Agung River.
Yeah.
Really lovely setting, lush and green. And we did... later, after we got married, we did a mission trip there too. So just really had a heart for the people.
So you flew past it from Australia there?
We had a different guy from church do our service, because at the time actually we were in a pastor handover at the church, so we didn't actually have someone to marry us. so someone from church did our vows and things like that, which is really special.
I've done a few weddings in Bali.
Yeah.
Just fly in there, do the wedding, fly back.
Not bad, hey. I mean, it's a very spiritual place, so I think for us, I just remember our song was It Is Well by Costea DeMarco, the song that you walk down the aisle to. And one of this Balinese girl came up to me afterwards and she goes, beautiful song. And, we just shared about Jesus.
Yeah. Tuhan Yesus.
Yeah, they're so open to it.
Yeah.
They're so open to it. And I think, we just fell in love with the people and just thought, it's a holiday.
Yeah.
People actually get to spend a week together. And you know what?
It was beautiful. It
was awesome.
The togetherness.
We had
And you didn't go away for the honeymoon. You stayed there with them.
We just stayed there.
Yeah.
It was so good. Yeah, so we had, at the time, we had just this great package where we could spend time at one of the resorts that's no longer there, actually. I think it's used to be Trump's resort or,
there you go.
or something. But it was just great, really good, really chilled.
You don't have to leave the resort. You can just stay there all day.
You could. But, I mean, we enjoyed sort of venturing out, but everything's
day
there.
tours and the buses and the BMOs.
Oh, gosh, I've never been a bus person. I always said to Riyadh, if we do that kind of thing, we just do our own thing. We go off the beaten track. But it was a really great time. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Australian Christians.
Yes.
You began a journey in the political world.
Yeah, I did.
What attracted you to that?
I did.
Was it an invitation or was something that you pursued?
Do you know, it's so funny because I spoke to one of my previous managers the other day, who was my manager at Prison Fellowship. And she always used to joke and said, Maryka, this job where you're in now, this is temporary. She goes, I always watch Q&A and I always picture you on a Q&A panel. And I go, whatever. Because I'd always go, this is ridiculous. And how is this legislation like this? And da-da-da-da-da. And so I just remember at the time going, what could it look like? What could it look like if I were to get involved in things politically? And honestly, I had no idea of Christian parties.
Any parties.
I had no idea of even politics or anything really. And it was so funny. I was going through our emails one day, clearing out the admin emails, and there was this Christian jobs email.
Yep.
And Australian Christians. And I thought, that's bizarre. Anyway, I opened it up and they were looking for a state director at the time. And I thought, I don't know if I'm, nearly qualified enough to, apply for this job, but I did anyway, as you do. And so, several weeks later, went through the application process, through the interview process and got the job. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Didn't think I would.
So you're 2 or 3 years now in the job?
5.
5 years, my word.
I know. it's gone so quick.
So you have an office here in Western Australia?
We do. We have a full functioning office in Osborne Park. We were in a very small office in Vic Park previously. Yep. And we just felt last year that God was really calling us out and to have our own space.
Yeah.
And so we took the leap of faith and signed a lease on a large office. That's enough space for meeting rooms
Boardroom,
and everything, boardroom.
Discussions.
And yeah, we got it at a really good price. God provided the space.
Beautiful.
Our landlord's this awesome guy who we always talk about God.
Yeah.
It's so cool. And the whole building now, like, it's so awesome because God, I always pray, oh Lord, just give us opportunities for people to just have a different perhaps understanding of who Christians are and how they think and what they do. And, you know, through this building, you know, we've been able to get to know all the people in this building.
As
and,
you do.
You know, it's just been really great and just encouraging them.
So how many on the team here in Western Australia?
So we've got a council of 10 and then we're about up to 4 staff at any given time. So I'm full-time.
Yeah.
And then we've got a business manager who's there 3 days a week.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What are you fighting at the moment?
Gosh, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? For us, last year, one of the main things when we were praying in the lead up to the election was about the protection of the innocent.
Yeah.
And I always remember thinking, Lord, like, what does that mean? And through that, a lot of the child protection bills have come across my desk. A lot of the inquests that were actually done to some of the youth and child suicides up north in the Kimberleys. And a lot of those recommendations that the coroner put in place to look after kids and their environments, the government's been dragging their feet on it.
Yeah.
So for us, even last year, a big part of what I'm doing now is, and I've actually got a couple of meetings this week too with several members of parliament for the regions to actually say, look, what has actually happened as a result of this inquest? You know, the government agreed to all these things and yet young people, children are still committing suicide. I mean, it's atrocious. Yeah. So the child protection side for us, I feel, is sort of our next frontier as far as legislation goes. Religious freedom, that's sort of federally always on the radar. I've got a bit of a different viewpoint on that bill, but that's sort of me. I just think it's dangerous when you legislate things like, you know, religious freedom. Yeah. You know, we're looking at it from a Christian point of view, but you know, so is every other cult and religion, and they'd be protected under this bill. So we have to be very careful what we push for in that sense. But yeah, from a priority point of view, young people, children, the vulnerable, the weak, that's been a really
the voiceless.
Yeah.
Those who don't have a voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what Christians should do.
Exactly.
Be a
exactly.
voice.
And you hear about the hot button topics, like I said a couple of weeks ago, you know, we hear about religious freedom and we hear about the you know, the gender and the transgenderism issue, and a lot of young people struggling with gender dysphoria. And you hear about those things a lot. And we should talk about it. It's important. But when it comes to kids, I feel that's probably an area that we've really overlooked as the church. Yeah. As a community of people, we've really overlooked how we actually get involved with child protection.
You know, it's interesting. When we go overseas to do missions, we all focus on children ministry.
Yes.
Yet here in Australia, we focus on everything else but children. Isn't that sad?
Absolutely right.
You know, we go to Indonesia, we go to the Philippines, we go to India.
The needs in our backyard.
The kids there, they sing, they worship, they know Bible verses. Yes. They drilled so well. Yes. You come here, our kids don't even know a Bible verse. No. They don't even know the songs. At Sunday school, they play games.
Yes.
At youth, they play games and ping pong. Yes. You know, there's not... We don't answer that need, which is very unfortunate.
And we have to be very aware too, spiritually, of what's going on in WA and Australia in that sense, because, you know, when a nation so squeezes out all forms of Christianity and talking about Jesus, and, you know, that has repercussions.
Of course.
You know.
On our watch.
Yes, that's right. And again, I was saying to my pastor a couple of weeks ago, we've so removed ourselves from these important conversations, we've created a perfect gap for something to come in and impose that. Of course it will. So I think as Christians, it's a real wake-up call. I'm not saying be combative or be aggressive, but, you know, we have to all play our part and actually in our own way,
Yeah.
speak the name of
Be
God.
watchful and say it. Utter it. You must utter it.
Absolutely.
There's no such thing as,
No. And
prayer
in our
walks are
schools,
wonderful. Doing laps is wonderful.
Yep.
But being a voice is just as important.
Yep, you have to speak it. We've got teachers now who email me regularly who literally are now praying through their classrooms.
Wonderful.
And it is it's crucial because the fight for the minds and the hearts of our kids and our young people is it's more militant now than ever.
I mean, you saw what the San Francisco Gay Choir did the other day. I mean, come on. It's just shocking. Absolutely shocking.
These things will continue if people don't jump up and down about them. Same with, City of Perth. A lot of companies or a lot of councils now have very extensive inclusion policies at the exclusion of everything else. It's the irony of it too.
You can't be inclusive and not exclude.
Yes. But see, they don't understand that reasoning. It's inclusion for some.
They're not sorting the problem.
But
they're
for
just
others.
bringing a band-aid solution.
Yes.
Which is very temporary.
And of course, we're all for inclusion. Of course, we love everybody, but there comes a point where, especially with when you see local shires and councils, what they're moving to, and putting things in legislation to make it more difficult for religious organisations to have a voice.
Look at history. Nobody cared for the vulnerable and for the marginalised as much as Christians did.
No.
Even today, they still do.
That's right. Yeah.
So, in fact, all these people that have all these crises, they need Christians.
Yes. And you know what? On that, I remember with the election campaign, I said to one of the members of parliament, because she said to me, we need less religion. I said, can I be completely frank with you? If we had less religion, you would not be able to cope with the welfare and the social services aspect of your electorate, because the churches, the soup kitchen, Salvation Armies, all these organisations,
they do all the hard work that you never do. Work. And it's all volunteer driven.
Exactly. So
and there's no cost to the community, no cost to no cost to the government.
Exactly. Remove them from an electorate. Well, let me tell you,
society
you are going
falls
to
apart.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
no other religion, in fact, apart from Christianity, gets involved.
Provides that. That's right.
In that, hands and feet.
Exactly. And it's that intrinsic motivation, of course, that we know that drives people. So, we have to be bold and not question, but challenge a lot of those statements on it, because the reality is we won't be able to fund a quarter of the services that the church is providing.
I believe every primary school and high school should have a church within it.
Yeah. Gosh, what a difference that would make.
If we stop thinking about church the traditional way, and even if we start in every primary school a church in their hall or in their undercover area, whatever area they have, that would be a great start.
Yeah. But the issue is not, kids are open.
Of course,
this is the thing.
Parents are open.
But as a society, we've just so created this anti-God, anti-religious
But Christians are timid.
Yeah.
And they don't want to voice it.
Well, that's what we said, it's a big wake-up call for the church.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially now. It is an opportunity, but it is a big wake-up call for the church.
Yeah. Well, I hope we do wake up.
Yeah, I think, I can already see even after the election, a big part of it was praying into suburbs and, raising up prayer altars around the place. And people need to realise it takes time.
Yeah.
And it's not just instant, okay, quick pray. This is spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
We need to stop being so weak in our understanding of what that means. Like this is really like getting on your knees and interceding and praying for our nation and our leaders. Yeah. Because there's so much at stake.
Yeah.
So it's that spiritual tenacity, I think it's that maturity and understanding that's going to be key, is when the church is unified in that mission and understanding how important it is to pray and intercede for our nation.
What shift would you like to leave behind you from your political life? The legacy.
I think the legacy side for me is for young people to have a platform where they can still feel emboldened. I often think like what we're doing, young people and our church kids, they're looking at us.
Sure.
They're all looking, how do those people around me in church interact with the conversations, the issues? They're looking at us for that. So for me, I want to make sure that I'm actually as emboldened as I can be, as unashamed as I can be, as loving God as much as I can, and modeling that to them so that they know there is nothing wrong with that. And when you put God first, you can't go wrong.
That's right.
You know, we don't have to hide our faith. We don't have to be ashamed about our faith. We don't have to be ashamed about what is right and is true. So for me, a big part of the legacy of what we all should be wanting to leave behind is a space where young people know who they are in Christ. They're praying, they understand God, they love God, and they're not afraid of the truth.
Beautiful. Well, you are already doing that shift.
Amen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot tonight.
Oh, good. It's been a blessing to share it.
It's beautiful, the resilience and the tenacity you have as well to carry on. And what I love about you is that you're doing it with enthusiasm.
Yes.
It's not just a job. It's
a
life.
That's right.
Which is beautiful.
Life. Yes.
You know, that's beautiful.
Awesome.
Well, what an amazing story, eh? We love it, don't we? What a beautiful agenda as well to help everyone out there, especially the children, the generations that come after us, by modeling a life worth living, by modeling a life with a voice, by displaying Christianity, by proving this Christianity that we live and the truth that we have in our hearts, and making sure that it's caught by the generations that follow after us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing this content. Thank you for the 5 stars we get on Apple Podcasts. They all matter. We love you. We thank you. And get online to Australian Christians and make a donation and become a member and lobby with them the amazing things that they are doing. And when voting comes around, make sure that you put your name right there, whatever it needs to be. Vote with boldness and vote with courage and support everything that this nation needs for the future. We bless you.
Thank you for joining us on Kingdom Stories from Down Under. We'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and share these stories with your wider community. And remember, every story is worth sharing, including yours.